Who's been stopped in a drink and drive roadblock?
Last weekend.
Had to blow in that infernal pipe? So, you know what I'm talking about. Madam Chair, fellow Toastmasters, my Christmas breathalyser experience. In my whole life before coming to Canada, I only ever once been stopped at any form of drink and drive roadblock. That's what they were called in South Africa, drunken driving roadblocks or drink and drive. But on that occasion, I hadn't had anything to drink. And the police there had a bit more of a sense of humour than our Canadian police, and tended to believe you if you said you hadn't had anything to drink, as long as you hadn't crashed your car on the way to the roadblock, and they waved me on. One time when I had a little bit to drink after a company function, I'd said to my wife at the time, you know, it's raining, maybe you should drive. This is before the days of ABS brakes and airbags. And we were driving a 404 Peugeot station wagon. It was quite a big car in those days. And it had drum brakes all the way around, so they were horrible in wet weather, they locked up. And I said to her, I think you better drive. So we had kids in the car, I'd had 3 beers. And she said, okay. As we were going along the Esplanade in Durban, I foolishly said to her, I think you're going a bit fast for the conditions. She was a large lady with a very short fuse, and she turned around and said, you asked me to drive, so stop backseat driving. So I cowered into the corner. We sat on the other side of the car. I cowered in the corner. I wasn't going to be stupid enough to risk upsetting her again. Sure enough, within a few minutes, she soberly and carelessly skidded straight into the back of a VW Beetle that had stopped at a red traffic light. I kept my tongue tied. I was not going to risk another tongue lashing. Fortunately for us, there was very little damage, and the people in the other car were either suspect in some way. They looked rather unsavoury, or they'd stolen the car, or perhaps they didn't have a license for insurance. They weren't at all interested in getting the police. The silencer box of that VW Beetle was hanging down almost on the ground. The bumper was a little dented. Our car was virtually untouched. They said, no problem, no, don't want the police. They were gone. That was my one experience. There was a really lovely story doing the rounds in Durban at the time, and there was a roadblock on the main highway, the N2 North, coming into Durban from the north, from a very wealthy and holiday and residential area called Umhlanga Rocks. And at that point in the highway, there was Armco barrier, middle and side. You could not turn around. It was quite a distance from the last off-ramp, big hypermarket nearby. And when they had a big roadblock there, Christmas season, holidays, the traffic would queue up for a kilometre, and they would gradually work through everyone. And they didn't have breathalyzers, I don't think. I think it was walk the line if they suspected, and then blood test. They used to have a caravan trailer on the side. Anyway, the story goes that the police had this big roadblock a couple of days before Christmas, and they were waving cars through, and they noticed a white Mercedes quite far back, not moving. They called and shouted, no, all the other cars drove around it. So eventually they walked back, and there's this very well-dressed, fairly exclusive businessman type sitting there in the passenger seat. And they said, sir, what are you doing? He says, what the hell do you mean, what am I doing? What are you doing? All this noise, flashing lights, cops everywhere. My poor driver, my chauffeur, who's just a unsophisticated black guy with a license, thought it was a terrorist ambush. He got out the car and he took off. He's run into the bush. I can't drive, I'm too drunk to drive. I've been to a cocktail party. Now what are you going to do? The cop said, we're terribly sorry, sir, we'll get you home. And they drove him home with his car. That stuck in my mind, and I always thought, what will I do if I get stopped at one of these drink and drive? So, come Christmas, my good lady Sue went off to England and Zimbabwe to go and visit our kids. So I was reduced to the stage of senior single starvation, trying to cook for myself. And some friends said, a whole group of us are going to Eastside Mario's just before Christmas. Wouldn't you like to come and have dinner? So I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Off I went. Now, if I drink 2 beers and a glass of wine a year, that's a lot for me. So I didn't have anything to drink at the dinner, completely sober. And while we're having the dinner, one of the ladies said, Peter, you're from South Africa. I said, yeah. She said, I've got a bottle of Amarula liqueur at home. Now, Amarula, do you know Amarula? It's made from a berry from the marula tree. And folklore has it that when those berries fall off and start fermenting, the elephants go and pick them up and consume them and get drunk, and they stagger all over the place. Now, that's a very popular story. I've yet to see it actually on film. Anyway, so it brought back a bit of nostalgic memory. I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind. So 4 of us went round to her house, and I had literally that much in a liqueur glass of Amarula. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and they said, right, I've got dogs to sort out and work to do at home, I'm on my way. as I drove away, I thought, wouldn't it be the ultimate in irony if on my way home I get stopped in one of these roadblocks because it's just before Christmas. Me who never drinks, and I've had this tot of liqueur. Sure enough, I go past Toyota, under the 401, going along Highway 2, heading towards home, which is in the direction of Paris. At Nick's truck stop on the intersection of the 53, flashing lights everywhere, cops all over the place. I thought, oh no, there's no way around. If I duck into Nick's, the service station, it's going to look suspicious. I can't get past. I'm in for it. So it's going through my mind, oh no, I'm going, first time in my life, I'm going to be compelled to blow in this infernal pipe. And I had real visions of hygiene problems. I mean, I didn't know, do they put a new liner on it? Do they use a new pipe? It might have been in a drug addict's mouth, or an alcoholic, or a vegetarian, or God help us, a politician or a lawyer. I mean, never mind the disease problem. So I thought, well, I can't do much about it. So my turn comes, and a very polite young cop comes, sticks his head in the window. I only realised later when someone told me he's actually sniffing for alcohol. And I didn't know what he was up to. And he backs out, he says, good evening, sir. I said, good evening. And he said, where have you been? May I ask you? He was very polite, really. I said, had dinner at Eastside Marriott on my way home. You need to drink. Yeah. No, I didn't know what to say. Some people say never admit to drinking alcohol. Others say you've got to tell the truth, because if you say no and they test you, even if you're below the limit, they've got this ability to take your license away. I said, I had a tot, and I held my hand up, of Amarula. He looked at me a bit strangely, and I said, well, a tot, it's one of those little glasses. He said, you mean a shot? I said, perhaps, yes, but tot. He says, what is Amarula? I said, it's a liqueur and it comes from berries. And he's looking at me really oddly. I thought, oh no, he's going to get me to blow. I said, hang on, you think I'm talking funny? He said, I'm a bit worried about you, sir. I said, I'll tell you why. I said, I've been through a whole year of dental deficiency and I'm almost terminally toothless. And 3 days ago, I got my dentures. Would you like to see them? That's why I'm talking funny. And I started taking out my false teeth at the top. He said, no. He recoiled in horror, cowered into the background. He said, that's quite all right, sir. Don't worry, I believe you. You carry on. Go home and have a nice evening. So what lesson did I get from my Christmas episode with the Breathalyser experience? And that was false teeth have more uses than just chewing food.